Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Eric and Eric here.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. So we got a full slate of stories, so let's dive right in. Jay Leno suffered a horrific third-degree burns on his face and hands from a car injury, basically, not a car accident.
No.
So he is a car enthusiast.
He's known for Jay Leno's Garage. He
Yes.
has, hundreds, I assume, classic cars,
Classics.
weird cars, like not just classic, like cool 50s and 60s cars from over a century ago.
Yeah, not muscle cars like
he
from
has those
Dukes
too.
Hazzard. He has those as well, but he really is fond of very old cars, like the earliest cars off the manufacturing line from Ford, Model Ts and things like that. He was working on one because his hobby is not just driving them around. He actually like sort of rolls up his denim sleeves and he gets in there and he works on the cars. So he was working on a 115-year-old car. It was a 1907 white steam car. And you can see a picture of it online. It looks so classic. The wheels are sort of thinner.
It's a beautiful car.
Beautiful. And it's restored to absolute perfection. He was working on a clogged fuel line. All of these cars obviously are, have old-fashioned equipment in them. He was working on it. And the gas line, I guess, broke in some way and sprayed gasoline all over him. And almost immediately there was a spark and he ignited. You've got an accelerant all over you. He's on fire. Very, very scary situation.
Could have killed him.
Absolutely could have killed him. I mean, this is serious because you can't just pat it out when you have gasoline on you. It just spreads
like a
very
mini
quickly.
explosion. Like you're sprayed in gasoline and then a spark goes off and he just erupted.
Horrific. So he had a friend nearby, a guy named
Fortunately.
Dave, really quick thinking, jumps on him, I assume sort of throws smothering blankets or something to douse the flame. But the damage was done. I mean, these fires burn very quickly and burn very hot. He's got third-degree burns he's battling in the hospital. Harvey spoke to him last night and said his spirits are very high. He doesn't sound loopy like he's on pain medication. He is sort of in good spirits.
Yeah, on paper, I didn't speak to him, but reading what he said, it sounds like Jay Leno.
It sounds like Jay Leno. I mean,
but
he's
like might have to have skin grafts on the left side of his face, on his hands. Also, I saw he's canceling his appearances for like 5 to 10 days.
Yeah.
I think I would be out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, you would think.
And look, Jay Leno's a workaholic.
He is a workaholic, and that is one of the things he's most famous for. He still does stand-up sets. I mean, this guy's been retired from The Tonight Show for years. He has the car shows and so forth, but he loves working, and he loves being in front of crowds, and that is just who he is. He may look different after this. Skin grafts have come a long way, but if he has serious burns on his face, there may be a difference.
It's just such a weird, like final destination kind of thing that a fuel line would spray him, and then a spark would go off, and there's a video. He actually did this car, this 1907 white steam car, on his Jay Leno's Garage, and he showed how it works because obviously the engine from 1907 is very different.
The tech is a little different.
And there's a part
Teslas.
where he's showing how it works, where he pulls his panel down, and I mean, I don't understand cars. I'm not a car guy, especially century-old cars. Yeah, but it basically it's like there's like a pilot light. You had to light in the engine to spark this thing, and he shows that on the show, and it kind of flares for a second. And he's like, "Oop, almost burned my hand there."
Oh, wow.
So it's a dangerous car.
It really is. Now, the good news is this is obviously very serious injuries. Apparently his eyes and ears, which are two very sensitive organs that if they're burned could have permanent damage, were not affected. So he should have sight. He should have all of his hearing, even if there's some physical differences in his look. Very, very fortunate to have his friend Dave around to sort of put him out. And I don't think this will dampen his enthusiasm for cars. Jay Leno seems to be the kind of guy who is very realistic about, I work on old cars, and
that is the risk you take,
and it's a risk that you take being a mechanic in the garage
with anything, but like particularly these cars where they're these combustible engines where you got to light fires under them, literally. Like things could happen. It's amazing. Something worse hasn't happened before with these old cars.
That's what I was thinking. He's worked on them for years, and for this to be the first sort of catastrophe that he's encountered, I'm sure he's had little flare-ups here and there. I don't think it'll deter him from wanting to work on cars. This is his hobby, and I think it goes with the territory. He loves it, and I think you'll see him back in the garage.
Well, like I said, given the potential for injury with these kinds of vehicles, and he's been doing this for a very long time.
He's got a great track record.
Yeah. More often than not, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, it's probably a freak accident.
It's a freak accident.
He knows what he's doing if he's done it for this long. So, good wishes to Jay and hopefully speedy recovery. Let's move on to a pretty dark story that is brewing about an old, not that old, but an older case.
It's been a while. Casey Anthony, she is doing her interview, speaking out for the first time ever publicly about the death of her daughter, Caylee, with this new Peacock special, Where the Truth Lies.
Yes.
And she's essentially...
Which is her perspective for the most part. It's not
her
Nancy Grace sort of drilling her with questions. We've done a story on that. This is Casey's version
Because the jury
of
did acquit her in the death of her daughter.
That's right.
Lots of people do not believe she's innocent, but she legally is. So she's speaking out, and she has another suspect, her own father.
Yeah, George.
Her father, George. So she says that he's the one who found Caylee's body, that she had drowned in a pool. She says she fell asleep with Caylee on top of her, and then she wakes up and her father's like, "Where is she?" And he finds her, and she's wet and cold, and she had died.
She's painting a picture of maybe like a nap with her daughter. It's unclear if it's in the evening or during the day where, your kid falls asleep on you. Caylee was, I think, 2 or 3?
She was 2.
She was 2 years old, so that happens. I have young kids.
And she woke up and didn't know where she was, and she's like, well, she wouldn't leave without me. And then her father finds the body, and then she says she didn't go to police for a while because she was in denial that her daughter had died, which is sort of odd. But
that's the craziest part in my mind.
She is now going on to say that her father, he had abused her sexually when she was a child, and she now thinks that he had moved on to her daughter and then killed her basically to get rid of the evidence of that.
All of the elements of this story make sense, except for the denial that your daughter has died. Look, my kid has fallen asleep on me. They do wander, and I'm a sound sleeper. They can wander off of you. All of that sort of makes sense. They can get into some peril. The father can come in and say that. But if your child is dead, and has drowned in a pool, and you've seen the body,
there's shock and maybe all the stages of grief, but
it's hard for me to make that
for
leap.
days that you just don't tell people your child's died.
If your father comes in and says, "Oh, she's wet," and I pulled her out of the pool and she's fine, you would want to hear your daughter being fine. I mean, drowning is one of the biggest parental fears in the world. Open bodies of water. They did have the pool. She doesn't think that Caylee would have been able to climb into the pool because there wasn't a ladder. That's why she suspects her father smothered her because she had been smothered in the past during abuse episodes that she alleges about her father.
The implication that he abused her, which, he had denied all of this back in the trial when she first sort of suggested some of these things, but now she's going full tilt basically.
Here's the thing. I don't think this narrative is going to work on the public. I really don't. Casey Anthony, you've developed your opinions at this point. She's going to tell this story, which sounds horrific, but it's going to sound so implausible that I think it's going to do her more harm than good in terms of just living her life.
It does, but this is because you and I remember this trial when it happened. So it's been over a decade now since this happened. I don't think anybody who followed that trial, their opinion is going to be changed by probably anything she has to say. But if you're 20 years old watching this,
hearing
like
it for the first time.
You were a child yourself when this happened. You probably don't really remember it or didn't understand it when it was happening.
That's a great point.
She could change the narrative in the future. Future generations might be like, well, maybe she didn't do it. I mean... that's a great point. To some people, this will be the first they're hearing all the sort of details. They might have heard her
case.
name, yeah.
Yeah, they might have a vague understanding.
Well, the same with the Dahmer series. A lot of people knew he was a murderer.
Yes.
But that was 30 years ago. So this is the first they were really seeing all of it, and the complaints of the family is that it sort of humanizes him in a way.
Yeah, and look, to give Casey Anthony her due, she was ultimately acquitted. There was a jury of her peers that said,
so was OJ.
Absolutely. I was wondering if the same thing could happen in, OJ's quite old, so he's going to have to get moving on a documentary, but some time has passed. That case was in 1994.
But you do see with
new generation
OJ,
of people.
Since he's been out of prison now, that you see younger people running up wanting to get selfies with him because they know who he is.
Yes.
They know the name. They know there was something happened, something bad maybe, but they don't really know all the details.
Particularly in bars, young blonde women know the association with Nicole Brown Simpson, and it's a little bit like a lark to them to go up to OJ
look, I got
and
a
dance
picture
with
with
him in a
OJ
club.
Simpson.
I'm a blonde. Oh, don't kill me.
Yeah.
Things tend to soften over time or change and mold. I mean, he was a scary figure in my head, and I still think of OJ as...
Well, Nicole Brown, allegedly, cut her throat till she was almost decapitated.
Yes.
That's... you can't soften that.
Yeah, guys our age who lived that trial. I mean, it was a day-to-day existence. You saw the evidence day in, day out. It was a...
And heard about the abuse.
You heard the abuse. There's a mountain of evidence. The way Johnny Cochran played the case was talked about ad nauseum on the news. So we lived it live. But now, if it's just sort of with a, reflecting on it, people could have a different view.
And same thing now with Casey Anthony. Because the thing is, especially because Casey's still here to tell her version, which she's now doing, Caylee fades into the background. Sadly, she lost her voice a decade ago.
Yeah,
and who that child was gets lost to time. That's always the thing with these. The victims are the ones who are not around.
That's right. That's right. The survivors of these tragedies are the ones who tell the stories over time. And Casey Anthony has every incentive to lie, to shade the truth in her favor. I'm not saying she's outright lying. I don't know the truth, but she is the only one carrying the narrative
Maybe she
forward.
is telling the truth.
She may be.
We have to leave that possibility open, I suppose. But
I wonder what George's response. He's alive, I assume. He has denied these allegations over time. This is not the first time she's brought her father in as a potential suspect.
No, she tied him in during the
trial.
I think this is the first time she's gone so far as to basically suggest he did it.
Yes. She's now painted a full narrative of how he may have done this. He had abused her. All those allegations were part of the trial that she was a victim of abuse in her childhood.
With OJ, the question becomes, okay, say you entertain Casey Anthony didn't do it. OJ didn't do it.
Yeah.
Who did?
Yes. Which is why OJ felt compelled to write that book. If I did it, he was trying to like sort of paint some sort of narrative of alternative theories and so forth. But wow, this is pretty heavy stuff. I think this will garner a lot of attention because people our age are still curious about the case and have sort of morbid fascination with.
And you haven't
Casey
seen her
Anthony.
Speak out about it.
And younger people have heard the name and say, "Oh, that's a great true crime."
What's this
true
about?
crime is very hot. So I do think it'll do well, but look at it with somewhat of a skeptical eye because some parts of this story just don't make sense from a parental perspective in my mind. All right, let's move on to Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
The book that this is a fascinating development. It doesn't involve Kyrie directly, but the book that was the basis for the documentary that he tweeted out a link to has now been pulled from the shelves. This was the anti-Semitic documentary, Hebrews to Negroes, Wake Up Black America. Kyrie watched a documentary on Amazon Prime, found it interesting in some respects, I guess, and posted the link, and that set off the whole course of events where he's now been suspended from the league, had conversations with the commissioner, and so forth. There was a lot of pressure after that for Amazon to have some accountability. Hey, you had this on your platform. Kyrie just watched it, but you're actually profiting from putting this on your platform and having people download it. Amazon has not taken it down, but Barnes & Noble now has pulled the book from their shelves. Some people will shout, censorship. We should have access to all types of information. But Barnes & Noble said, look, this is hate speech, and we don't have to carry it on our shelves. We're a private company. We're not the government.
Yeah.
We're not going to carry it. We think it's a dangerous text, and there's no reason, and no one can force us to do so. I think it's responsible.
Barnes & Noble's not a school library that's funded with taxpayer money. They can stock or remove whatever they want.
And they have. And now what do you think Amazon does? Because now you could have all held the line. All the platforms could have said, we are neutral. We're a platform. People put things on our platform that we don't agree with. Obviously, there's things on Amazon's platform that are not problematic, but that Amazon as a company doesn't subscribe to. Should Amazon get in the business of pulling this? Is it a sort of slippery slope? People are going to say, this is not a world you want to live in.
There's so much outcry against banning books right now.
Yeah.
And usually it's from the left complaining about people on the right trying to ban things with gay themes or trans themes. Is this, and I'm not equating, this will be the argument. It's like, oh, well, you're fine for book banning with this. But honestly, a genuine question. I don't know. Does Amazon sell Mein Kampf, Hitler's book?
I don't
know if they do or not.
Where I was going to go. That was a big deal when I was a kid. Could you get a copy? It seemed like almost a strangely haunted text. And should it be available? What were Hitler's words while he was writing in prison? Could we understand him? Mein Kampf is, Hitler was a big historical figure. This was a work from his twisted
that
mind.
Book for evil is important to the 20th century. But do you want it available for sale? Because it still influences people. This book, the Hebrews to Negroes book, influences people. We've seen that.
Yeah. We read Machiavelli.
Because hate speech is not perfected.
I guess that's the thing. We read problematic texts that motivate and influence people to do bad things all the time. Mein Kampf has a historical significance. He's a very important historical figure. I mean, Hitler was Times Man of the Year. This is garbage to me. Like, Barnes & Noble and Amazon don't have to carry garbage. And I think it's, no, I do. I don't think it's like,
I think Mein Kampf is garbage too, but.
It is, but it's like historically significant garbage. And this is just like trash screed. It doesn't, from what I've heard, it's not very well researched. It's not very well done. This is not a piece of art in the sort of same way.
There are a lot of books that are not well researched and not well done.
Fair enough.
You can get anywhere. Do you consider this book hate speech then? That's the question. And Barnes & Noble does. And it is totally, as a private company, it's within their right to remove it.
Yes. And I do think it's within Amazon's right. And I now think Amazon will be under an inordinate amount of pressure to remove this. I mean, there may be no place for it in the discourse. And it does potential harm.
You can already see the other side. This just proves their point. Like, you say bad things and they just take it away. And
And it becomes sort of a forbidden fruit. There's an element of that argument of like, what are they hiding from us? And that is somewhat, that's an attractive line of reasoning in some sense. If you remove these things, you make them more tempting in some way. You think, this is a haunted book that they don't want us to see, and it becomes even more alluring. That said, this one is just it's radioactive at this point. I think it's responsible Barnes & Noble to pull it, and I do think Amazon will probably do so. I think they'll probably follow suit, but we'll have to see.
They'll try and probably wait for all the attention on Kyrie to pass, and then quietly just remove it.
Yes. All right, we've done some heavy stuff. We've done gasoline burns. We've done, Holocaust books.
Well, there's still some murder in this now.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Next topic.
So let's end on Jeopardy, and I want to do a sort of combo of Jeopardy stories. We'll start with the arguably more serious one, although they're all ultimately not that serious. Celebrity Jeopardy is going on right now, and there was a question on the show yesterday that people have a problem with. The question...
You mean there was an answer?
That's
you don't know how Jeopardy works. Wow, that's
Apologies. There was an answer, and the clue was in 2021, fugitive Brian Laundrie ended his days in Florida's Myakkahatchee Creek, home to these long and toothy critters. So the end of the question is sort of playful. The
category was A-list, we should say. So all the answers started with A.
And the question would be, the answer?
What are alligators?
What are alligators? So fine, that is an answer to a question. That creek does have alligators. Is it tasteless to mention by name Brian Laundrie ending his days? There was, sort of...
It's a weird connection.
Weird in multiple ways.
To get to alligators. If Brian Laundrie or Gabby Petito had been a question on Jeopardy...
Fine.
Okay.
Yes.
But to tie it into alligators? That would be like if the category, if it was like a Volkswagen Beetle, it'd be like serial killer Ted Bundy slaughtered women in this fun car.
Yes.
Like, why would you do that?
Yes. Yes.
What a random connection.
O.J. Simpson traipsed through their blood in what fancy Italian shoes? Like, there are ways to ask these questions and get Bruno Mali in there or get all these answers.
Yeah.
But it did seem a little bit playful. I usually defend the writers at Jeopardy. It's a very sort of sacred job in the trivia community. If you get to be a writer of trivia questions for Jeopardy, you've really made it. You've just made it.
Yeah.
And so I think they take their job very seriously. It's highly coveted. But this is a bit of a miss. I do think they're being dragged sort of, rightfully. One, Brian Laundrie, for all of his flaws as a human, was the son of two parents who are living, and he was consumed by alligators after murdering Gabby Petito. It's tasteless on that level.
Even making the association of Brian Laundrie to alligators is a weird leap. But then what do they go? Toothy critters.
Yeah,
like it's such a cutesy way of the toothy critters that devoured this guy who murdered this woman.
You don't want to elicit a laugh line,
No.
and toothy critters is a laugh line in trivia world, and it's just odd. It's odd that they did it. It's odd that it passed all of the layers of sort of review that go through. Jeopardy questions aren't just written on the fly and thrown up there. This is a vetted process. It's strange to me that it made it through. And look, they'll get some flack. Jeopardy is an institution. It won't be harmed by this in the long run. And they did step in it a little bit. I think they stepped in it.
You know who would have protested that question?
Give it to
Alex Trebek.
Yes.
He would have had something to say, I'm sure, about, maybe we shouldn't do that.
I agree. And he was very, very involved in the show and how it ran. He previewed the questions and things like that.
Especially that one, you have to know how to pronounce Myakkahatchee.
Yes.
You don't want to just throw that up on the host. But...
And Ken has a bit of a...
this is Mayim.
Oh, this is Mayim. Yeah, that's true. That was Mayim. So I don't know Mayim's sense of humor. I know Ken is a little bit salty. Not saltier is the wrong word, but he's more willing to push the envelope, and he can have a dark sort of sense of humor at times. So I'm not sure he would have protested. But anyway, this was Mayim. But we'll see. I think you may see more of this in the future because I don't think the gatekeepers are quite what they used to.
And it gets attention.
It gets attention. This is true. And every show needs attention. Now, let's go to my last bit of Jeopardy knowledge is...
Speaking of Alex Trebek.
You remember HQ? HQ, the huge phenomenon.
Yeah, you loved HQ. He would every day. Are you on HQ? Did you do the HQ today? We gotta. You would
I had alerts.
Lock your office to get the HQ questions.
Listen, I would have
you were
post-mortem with all my friends, and it started to play multiple times a day. I played all the time. But HQ is now a once-a-week phenomenon. It's sort of dying. Anyway, the former host who became a star in his own right, Scott Rogowski, was the first host. That's when it blasted onto the scene.
He was the Alex Trebek of HQ.
The Trebek. He was called Quiz Daddy. He had all these nicknames and so forth. He now... has a small sort of vintage clothing shop where he's collected all these things over the years and he sells them. He has a little storefront and everything. Well, he went to Alex Trebek's estate sale, which is, when someone passes away, they'll often, their house, you can just sort of walk through it and pick out items and buy them for,
of course, it sounds morbid, but when you're driving around and you look for estate sales on a weekend,
so much fun.
Like, ooh, what are you going to find?
Yes.
You don't know.
So Scott Rogowski says he went to the estate sale, and while a lot of people were looking at all of Alex's fancy art, he beelined it for the closet, and he starts rummaging through Alex Trebek's shirts and clothing and articles of clothing, looking for gems that he could sell and might have some value. It is going to charity, so he wasn't just sort of trying to profit.
So he's selling these clothes of Alex Trebek's, which sounds like a vulture or something.
Yes.
It's going to a pancreatic cancer charity, which is what Alex Trebek died of. So This is for a good cause.
For a great cause. So he went through it, and Alex is famously Canadian, and he found some real gems. The best one he found was a really pristine Ottawa Senators jersey. Alex Trebek was really into hockey, loved the Senators, and it's a jersey that is absolutely regulation, and then you turn it around and it says Trebek on the back.
Yeah.
The stitching is perfect.
That's
going to go for a lot. There are some articles that are just like things you accumulate in life.
Novelty t-shirts.
Novelty tees.
When I saw it was Alex Trebek's closet, I was like, ooh, it's going to be all his suits from Jeopardy. I was like, no, it's none of that.
Those
are not things they left in the estate sale.
No, that's true. They weren't left in the estate sale. And he was also, remember, Harvey went to his house for an episode of Objectified, which is where Harvey would go to a celebrity's house and look at things on their shelves and sort of learn about the person.
They're objects.
They're objects, if you will. And Alex Trebek was quite a casual guy. He loved working on his sprinklers, and he wore T-shirts on the weekend. He was not fussy in the way that he was, his game show persona was. So it was a real window into, Alex. We miss him a lot. If you're a fan of the show, now the stage is called the Alex Trebek stage. I mean, there are elements of him that will always be associated with the game. In my mind, it's never been the same without him. It'll move on. I still enjoy
like Bob
Jeopardy,
Barker, who's still alive, but and Drew Carey's done well in The Price is Right. But for a lot of people,
it's just different.
It's just always Bob Barker.
That's right.
And it's always going to be Alex Trebek. And it's interesting. A lot of these clothes, though, still had the tags on them. So did he ever even wear them?
I think when you're that famous, people just give you stuff constantly, and you just throw it in your closet.
Yeah.
So the auction went down on yesterday, and so I'm sure a lot of this stuff sold. But go check it out on the website, because there's a video with Scott where he just talks and goes through some of the articles, and it's really fascinating. Yeah. That'll do it for us. We'll see you next time.